The laughter died in an instant when David slammed his fist on the table and shouted across the crowded Lincoln High cafeteria, "Hey, everyone, look at the fag who thinks he can sit with normal people." John froze with his lunch tray, shaking in his hands as hundreds of eyes turned toward him, the words echoing off the walls like thunder in the small Illinois town. Food splattered at his feet when he dropped the tray and ran for the door, his tears already blurring his vision, but the damage was done. The public shaming for simply being who he was would follow him for years. That afternoon, John sat alone on the bleachers after school, replaying every laugh and whisper from the hallway. At 18, he had only told two close friends he was gay, thinking the truth would free him, but David, the star athlete with his crew of followers, had turned it into a weapon. John's parents were waiting at home, his mother worried but silent, his father disappointed and distant, refusing to talk about it. He packed a bag that night and left for Chicago the next morning, determined to build a life far from the pain of that cafeteria moment. College became his escape, where he studied architecture and met Michael in a campus support group for LGBTQ students. Michael, with his calm smile and steady presence, became the first person who made John feel seen without judgment. Their early dates were simple walks along Lake Michigan, talking about dreams and fears under bright sunny skies that seemed to promise a new beginning. Years passed and John built a successful career designing community centers that welcomed everyone. He and Michael moved into a cozy apartment in Chicago, where mornings started with coffee on the balcony and evenings ended with quiet conversations about the day. Yet the scars from high school lingered in quiet ways. John hesitated to speak up in meetings when colleagues made offhand comments about family values. He avoided family gatherings back home, where his father still changed the subject whenever his life came up. Michael noticed and gently encouraged him to face those shadows, but John preferred to keep moving forward, believing success would erase the past. One evening, as they sat on their balcony watching the city lights, John confided how the cafeteria humiliation still made him question his worth. Michael pulled him close and whispered that their love was proof he was enough. The moment felt like healing, but John knew deep down the wound was not fully closed. Work at the architecture firm kept John busy with projects that mattered, like redesigning a youth center for at-risk teens. He volunteered there on weekends, mentoring kids who reminded him of his younger self. Michael supported every step, teaching high school history and bringing home stories of students facing similar struggles. Their relationship deepened through small acts of care, like Michael surprising John with tickets to a baseball game, or John cooking Michael's favorite pasta after a long day. Family pressures mounted when John's mother called asking him to visit for the holidays. He agreed, but the trip brought back old tensions, his father barely acknowledging Michael and relatives asking awkward questions about when he would settle down with a woman. John left early, feeling the familiar sting of rejection, but Michael's understanding hug at the airport reminded him he had chosen his own family. Meanwhile, back in the old hometown, David had stayed put, working as a mechanic, raising his teenage son Ethan alone after his wife left years ago. David never spoke of the high school incident, but the guilt sat heavy, though he buried it under a tough exterior. Ethan, at 16, was quiet and withdrawn, struggling with his own questions about identity that he dared not voice to his father. School became a battleground for Ethan, with whispers and taunts that echoed the past in ways neither knew. John had no idea about any of this until a call from the youth center director mentioned a new kid named Ethan Miller, whose last name rang a distant bell. John brushed it off at first, focusing on his own life, but the coincidence lingered in his mind during late-night talks with Michael. One week into the center, John saw Ethan sitting alone in the bright common room, sketching quietly. The boy looked lost, and John felt an unexpected pull to help without knowing why. He introduced himself as a volunteer and offered tips on drawing buildings. Ethan opened up a little about feeling different and not fitting in. John listened, sharing vague stories of his own high school days without revealing too much. Back home, he told Michael about the encounter, and they discussed how helping one kid could make a difference. The decision to get more involved came naturally, but John had no clue it would force him to confront the very person who had shattered his world 15 years earlier. The youth center became a second home for John, where he spent extra hours with Ethan, helping him with school projects and listening to his fears. Ethan confided about arguments with his dad, David, who pushed him towards sports and girls without understanding the confusion inside. John felt a strange familiarity, but pushed it aside, focusing on being the support he wished he had had. Michael joined some sessions, bringing books and encouragement that helped Ethan smile for the first time in weeks. Their own relationship grew stronger through this work, with late-night talks about how love meant showing up even when it was hard. John started anonymously donating to cover Ethan's therapy sessions using his connections to get the boy into a better program without anyone knowing the source. News from home reached John through an old classmate that David was struggling financially after a bad business deal, and his son was slipping further into depression. The pieces clicked when John saw Ethan's full name on a form and realized this was the son of the boy who had humiliated him. The revelation hit like a wave in the middle of a bright sunny afternoon at the center. John sat on a bench outside processing the anger, the pity, and the unexpected urge to help anyway. Michael listened patiently that evening as John paced the apartment wrestling with a choice. Helping meant risking reopening old wounds, but ignoring it felt like becoming the bully himself. They decided together that quiet support was the way forward without revealing John's identity. Ethan thrived under the anonymous aid, his grades improved, and he started opening up more at sessions. John watched from afar, feeling a mix of satisfaction and unease. Work deadlines piled up with a big project for a community pride event, but John poured extra effort into it, seeing it as a way to create spaces where no kid would feel the way he did. Family calls from his mother brought more pressure to reconcile with his father, but John focused on the present, building a life with Michael that felt solid. The internal conflict grew as he wondered if forgiveness was possible without ever facing David again. Tensions rose when Ethan faced a school suspension for defending himself against bullies. John used his professional network to advocate quietly for the boy, arranging counseling and a meeting with administrators. The process required John to review records that confirmed David was indeed the father, and the memories flooded back in vivid detail during a sleepless night. Michael held him through the panic attack, reminding John that his strength came from surviving, not forgetting. Their bond deepened as Michael shared his own past struggles with acceptance from his conservative family, making John realize they were partners in every sense. David, meanwhile, grew suspicious of the sudden help coming to his son, but accepted it out of desperation. He attended a parent meeting at the center where John spotted him from across the room but stayed hidden in the crowd. The sight of David, older and worn, stirred complex emotions in John: anger, mixed with a strange compassion for the man who had also been trapped by small-town expectations. Back home, John and Michael argued briefly when John wanted to pull back, fearing exposure, but Michael encouraged him to see it through. The argument ended in a quiet embrace on their balcony under the afternoon sun, solidifying their commitment. Ethan began to confide more, telling John during a session about feeling different and scared to tell his dad. John offered careful advice, drawing from his own journey without giving away his connection. The help extended to funding a summer program for Ethan that allowed the boy to explore art and identity in a safe environment. John felt the weight of his secret growing, but also a sense of purpose that healed parts of his past. Work on the Pride Center project progressed with designs that incorporated open spaces for community healing, mirroring his own path. Family reconciliation seemed distant, but a call from his mother brought news that his father was ill, prompting John to consider a visit, though he postponed it to focus on Ethan. The crisis peaked when Ethan had a breakdown after a particularly harsh confrontation with David at home. John received an urgent call from the center and rushed over, staying late into the evening to support the boy. He arranged emergency resources and even covered the cost of a short stay at a supportive residence without revealing his role. Michael joined him for the drive home, where they talked through the ethical lines they were walking. The experience brought them closer, forcing John to examine how his past still controlled his fear of vulnerability. David reached out anonymously to the center, thanking the unknown benefactor, and John read the message with mixed feelings. Seeing the change in Ethan gave John a quiet pride, but also stirred questions about whether David had changed. At work, John faced subtle prejudice when a client made a comment about the Pride Project, but he stood his ground for the first time, drawing strength from his life with Michael. Their relationship faced its own test when Michael suggested moving in more permanently and adopting a pet as symbols of commitment. John hesitated due to old fears, but ultimately agreed, leading to a joyful weekend shopping for a puppy that brought laughter back into their home. Ethan started to flourish, attending school regularly and even joining a support group. John continued the secret aid, sending resources through the center and mentoring from afar. The internal growth in John was profound as he realized helping Ethan was not about revenge or forgiveness, but about breaking the cycle of pain. A weekend trip with Michael to a cabin in Wisconsin allowed them to reconnect deeply, talking about future dreams under bright forest sunlight. The past felt less heavy, and John began to consider reaching out to his family on his own terms. Confrontation became unavoidable when Ethan insisted on meeting his mystery mentor. John arranged a careful meeting at the Sunlit Community Center, where he revealed himself, gradually sharing just enough to guide without full disclosure. Ethan was grateful, and the moment brought tears to John's eyes as he saw the boy he could have been. David learned of the connection through a slip and showed up unannounced at the center, creating a tense encounter in the bright lobby. John stood tall, explaining his actions calmly, without accusation, focusing on Ethan. David was stunned silent at first, then muttered an awkward apology that felt years too late. The emotional fallout hit John hard that night as he and Michael processed the meeting. Old wounds reopened, but this time John had the tools to heal them through open conversation. Their love provided the anchor with Michael, reminding him that growth was choosing kindness despite the pain. Work on the Pride Center reached a milestone with a public presentation where John spoke about creating inclusive spaces. The applause felt like validation of his journey. Family news arrived that his father wanted to talk, and John agreed to a visit with Michael by his side, marking another step forward. Ethan thrived with the support now open and even began mediating small conflicts at school. David kept his distance but sent a note through the center expressing regret. John chose not to respond immediately, letting the actions speak. The relationship with Michael blossomed further as they planned a small commitment ceremony with close friends in their apartment overlooking the city. The preparation brought joy and reflection on how far they had come from the shadows of past. The high point arrived during the Pride Center opening, where Ethan spoke briefly about finding his voice thanks to mentors like John. David attended quietly in the back row, watching the event with a mix of pride and remorse. John spotted him but continued his speech about resilience and community under the bright stage lights. Afterward, a private conversation in the sun-filled courtyard allowed David to offer a genuine, if clumsy, apology for the cafeteria incident. John accepted it not for David, but for his own peace, explaining how the help for Ethan was about healing cycles, not settling scores. The moment felt cathartic, leaving both men changed. Michael stood by John's side throughout, providing quiet strength that reinforced their bond. Family reconciliation progressed, with John's father finally acknowledging his son and Michael during a hospital visit. The conversation was emotional but honest, marking a turning point. Back in Chicago, life settled into a new normal, with John and Michael celebrating their commitment in a small gathering filled with laughter and support. Ethan visited often, now considering architecture as a career inspired by John. The Secret Help had evolved into open mentorship, building a bridge across generations. Challenges remained, but they faced them together. John reflected on how the humiliation that once defined him had become the catalyst for his greatest strengths. The internal conflicts resolved into a quiet confidence that allowed him to mentor others with authenticity. David began attending support groups for parents, learning to understand his son better. The story of growth rippled outward, touching friends and colleagues in the community. The final chapter brought full circle when John and Michael stood on their balcony one sunny afternoon, watching Ethan play with their puppy in the park below. The years of struggle, love, and choices had shaped them into men who chose compassion over bitterness. John felt a profound sense of peace, knowing his actions had not only helped Ethan but freed himself. David sent a card on the anniversary of the center opening, simply saying thank you. John smiled and tucked it away as a reminder that change was possible. Their life continued with new projects, family visits, and the steady rhythm of love that had carried them through. John often thought back to that cafeteria day not with pain but with gratitude for the path it set him on. Michael remained his anchor, and together they built a legacy of kindness in a world that still needed it. Ethan graduated and moved forward with confidence thanks to the quiet support that started it all. True or false, helping the son of the man who once humiliated you for being gay represents true forgiveness and personal growth rather than weakness.